So Kyle, you and I share something unbelievably old school, which is having an at yahoo.com email address. If I have it right, ksims91 at yahoo.com
That's right, baby.
is your email for your personal. Why do you still have Yahoo? I have my own answers. Why is it ksims91? And listeners out there, don't send him an email.
Oh,
But
you
I
can
am
if you want.
curious. You can if you
Yeah.
want. Why ksims91 at yahoo.com?
Yeah, it's a great question, Travis. I think that a couple things. I do have a Gmail account, but the real ones hit me
How
up on
modern
the
of you.
I know, but the real ones hit me up on the Yahoo account like you, right? That's the special one. So KSIMS 91 was my birth year, man. And so I just want to make sure
Ah,
everybody knows that's not true. I was born in 80. So
I was
I'm
going
an
to
old
say, should I correct him or
No, you're
is he
good.
going to correct himself? You wish is what I was going to say, but keep going.
Yeah. No, I was actually born in 80, which kind of puts me in the borderline of like Gen X and millennial. And so
Sure.
depending on the day, I'll identify as either one of those.
You've got
But
the wisdom of a Gen Xer and the haircut of a millennial is what I'd like to say.
that's well, thank you. Thank you. I'm a young Gen Xer, right?
Come on.
But 91 was one of my football numbers back when I used to play football. And so that is the
At a
reference
at
to
a
91.
very, very low education university of Harvard, correct?
I did play there. Yes, not. We actually do have a pretty good football team, but it's not primarily known for its football.
I
It's
don't know
it's
what
more
it's
known
known
for
for. Yeah.
yeah, it's more known for its academic you know rigor and incredible alumni, of which I am an alumni, but not one of those incredible alumni.
Get out of here.
Let's be honest. Life's messy. Decisions are complex. And it's not all black and white. But these are the decisions that shape our growth. Welcome to The Tension. Let's get into it.
Well, thank you, Kyle. Okay, so everyone, we are here with Kyle Sims. Kyle Sims and I go back over a decade. We've done life and business together. Kyle Sims is the person that created the name 49 Financial. Back when I was in elementary school, he had a dream for a company like this, and here we are together getting to do it. What an honor, what a blessing. He's also, from a stat standpoint, been over multiple billions of dollars, hundreds of advisors, and at 49 Financial today, he is over Houston and Dallas as we continue to see two of the largest offices and GDPs in the country continue to grow and scale under his leadership. And so we are super excited. Kyle, welcome to The Tension.
Man, thanks so much for having me. It's a joy to be here, and I'm just super grateful for you doing this, and super grateful for you taking the time to have this conversation with me, man.
Well, I think listeners out there, this one is the one that I can tell you already, and this is not, we've not edited this. I'm saying this before we even get going. This is the one that you really will want to listen to if you're sitting there saying, "Gosh, there is so many things. There's so many things from my parents to being a parent." To being a friend, to being a son, to trying to get it done at work and the community and church. And so today, the tension that we will be unpacking with Kyle, he's going to give us tons of wisdom and stories and things he's failed at, things he's succeeded at. But it's all around the idea of the tension of getting it all done. I think we all struggle with this idea of it feels like there's just all these balloons up in the air that we're trying to continue to hit up. And we feel like we look back just a second later and there's a balloon on the floor and we're like, oh, like these priorities and managing these are so hard. And Kyle is one of the best I've seen at getting it all done. He is so involved. In fact, when I meet people that know him in Dallas, they say, oh, that's the best person of Dallas. So I don't know if Kyle, you won an award for that, but I have now heard that 3 or 4 times. So either Kyle is telling people prior to meeting me to introduce him that way, which would be kind of sad, or he is just that amazing of a person. I'm going to choose the latter. But Kyle, take us back. I think that we could go so much, and we'll go to all of your background and upbringing, all these amazing parts of your story. But I want to start with 2019. Because it seemed like, knowing your story, this was the big year that I would say you felt the most tension of all the things at once. And I just love for you to unpack like what was going on that year. And then we'll start talking about just what did you learn when you think about trying to get it all done in that year.
Yeah, man. Well, first off, wow. Well, that's a high bar, and there's a lot of exceptional people in Dallas and all over the world. Of course, but that is very gracious and kind of you to say. So let's
Hey, they
go.
say it, not me. I didn't say I agree. Let's just be
Well,
super
yeah,
clear.
yeah, that's a good point.
Just kidding. Keep going. Keep going.
That's a good point. Let's go October of 2019. You're right, bro. It was an intense season where I felt the pull of all of these different things all at once. I would say it was one of the most difficult seasons that my wife Julie and I walked through together. And I am just so grateful to have an incredible bride to navigate these
Mm,
things with. Um, so at that time, I remember, I'll take you to a specific day. My father, who I would count as my hero, his health had been in steep decline.
mm,
And I took a day off of work because I knew that he was likely nearing the end of his race here on this side of eternity. And I just wanted to spend some extra time with him. And so it was a Monday. I took the day off. We went and we hung out. We just had an incredibly uh, amazing, impactful, one of those days you'll never forget.
yeah.
And on that day, I know he shared with me so much wisdom that I knew, but I didn't know just how much I was going to need it in the ensuing weeks. And that would be the last significant time I'd get to spend with him in that type of an environment prior to him going into the hospital for the
Mm,
last time. So not long after that, my professional world took a dramatic turn. I was very fortunate to get into the financial services industry approximately 15 years prior to that, and had been with a phenomenal company. But just a couple of years prior to 2019, I had partnered with 49 Financial, and in many ways had taken the learnings that I had garnered from my time with that large company and begun to launch our Dallas office of 49 Financial, which at the time was the first time we had launched 49 Financial outside of the Austin geography. And for anybody that has started something new, the demands when you're starting from scratch that will require of you. And
yeah.
so we were 2 years into to that. At that time, I'm just kind of compiling all these different threads. At that time, my wife and I, a couple years prior to that, had just completed the adoption of the last two adoptions that we would do. And we had been through an intense season of foster care and adoption that went all the way back to 2008. And that included doing foster care for a number of kids and having the
Yeah.
privilege of getting to adopt 4 of our 5 kids. So all of those things were compounding and coming together at once. And it wasn't long after that day that the professional journey would take a big twist. And not only would we leave that former institution, we would launch 49 Financial as an independent firm and everything that goes into it. And you had a front row seat for all of that. So all of that was happening at once. And there was a tremendous amount of tension that was placed on me.
Yeah. Well, I want to unpack a few things here because there were other spots in your life, but we'll stay here. You know, you mentioned you got some wisdom from your dad that would help you in the days that would ensue, and of course, I know the story of what happened. But can you both give and maybe shed some light on, because I think that hearing from someone that knows that these are the last of their days and sharing input in that moment, I mean, that's the thing we should all be paying attention to, right? That's
Yeah.
the wisdom. And so I'd love for you to unpack just maybe what are some of the things you learned, and then maybe how did you use those in this season of tension?
Yeah. No, I really appreciate you asking, man. So, my parents, I was incredibly blessed and fortunate to be raised in a household where faith was central to everything. It was the foundation upon which my parents built their house. Sorry, man. Upon which my parents built their family. And
Yeah.
my father's journey through life is an incredible story in and of itself. He was born during the Korean War. He was brought over to the U.S. And adopted here by a family in the U.S. And he just went on to put himself through college, be very productive in society,
Amazing.
and build the family that he never really knew. And I think for anybody that has spent time with really anyone who's facing the end of their days, but certainly a loved one, it's an opportunity for them to reflect on what really matters. And
Yeah.
mom and dad did so many amazing things for us, but I think it wasn't any one particular thing that was said, but rather it was just a perspective that looked to eternity. Our faith is something that is integral to us, and as I engaged in that conversation and just hearing him reflect on the things that ultimately he was most proud of and most grateful for, and the things I was most proud of as his son, it was all those things that were eternal in nature. And
Yeah.
it was a reminder in the midst of having to make some really difficult decisions. Am I
Yeah.
going to choose those choices or make those choices that are going to be rooted in my temporary comfort? Or am I going to do something that, Lord willing, I get another 40, 50 years, I can look back on with my son or daughter and say, I'm proud of the decisions I made because I'm not living with any regret. And so
Mm.
we're going to lean into doing hard things. And then the ensuing weeks and months were very, very hard for us. And I think having that reminder for him that, look, it's worth it, and the Lord has you in all of this, and you're going to be just fine. It created so much substance and meaning and power to the work that we were doing in those ensuing months.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and if you can, just because I remember we were at the height of just all of the craziness is the best term I can say for what was going on with work and just a lot of unknowns and a lot of things. And yeah, after you make decisions like this, the ones that really matter, of course, then you get to realize all that that means, right? And we
Yeah.
realize that together. But one thing I've actually never asked you, and so if you're comfortable speaking about it, I just remember, your dad passing away during all of that, and you made him proud by some of the decisions you made. And frankly, sitting here, 6 years later, continue to make that I get to see every day. But you gave one of the most beautiful talks I've heard at a funeral and directed towards your dad. And so, if you don't mind, like there's a tension of you're trying to be the stabilizer for your family because you're so much of a
Hmm.
glue to your family. You're trying to be a glue to then your current family, Julie and the kids, then all the people at work that rely on you. Like, how did you stabilize all that, but still even prep and deliver something so beautiful for your best friend, your dad?
Um, Man, again, I appreciate you saying all of that. That's incredibly gracious of you. Um, I think that part of in those intense moments, one thing that was just so critical for me was my community, you being chief among those, especially not just in a professional setting, but in a personal setting, just helping to shoulder the load and bear the
Yeah.
burden. My wife, Julie, it was amazing walking through that season. I couldn't imagine having someone more supportive to do life with than her.
Yeah.
Dang, dude, I'm a big crybaby, bro. Um,
I'm
and
not, I don't think anyone that knows you is surprised by this,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah. I know this.
keep
I know
going.
this, man.
We want to
I
know
think
the answer though.
Yeah, so I think having people like that, of course, I watch my mom, who we refer to as an oak tree, just being so
Mm,
anchored
mm,
in the right things during that season. I have two amazing sisters, so community is big for me. And man, just to pause there, if you're not doing life with people where you are anchored in the same things and you are pursuing, the same overarching purpose together, you're forfeiting all that this life has to offer. Because I've known no greater joy than getting to do that with people that I love. So that's one big thing. And what was the question? How do you bear all those
Well,
things?
well, it was almost, I mean, to me, again, you don't necessarily have to answer, but it was just, I sat there in one of the pews and heard you give a message about your father at his funeral that was so wildly powerful and impactful to me.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and so like, how did you, for those that have gone through it, I'm sure they're kind of reliving that moment, but like, how did you find the confidence? How did you find the words in the
yeah,
midst of it? Wasn't like you just got to sit there and mourn and grieve. You had
sure.
everything else going upside down.
Yeah. A good friend of mine shared a quote with me a long time ago, and I think my father learned to live this out as he navigated life, and I think that really helped a ton. So the quote is, if you can look back in thanksgiving, you can move
Yeah.
forward in faith. But if you look back with anger and resentment, you're going to move forward with fear and anxiety.
Come
So
on.
yeah, it sucks, man. I mean, like we've all been through hard things and we can all look back on those things and we can resent those things. We can be angry about them and you need to process hard things. Don't hear me say you just need to stuff them and be like, oh, great, I'm grateful.
Yeah.
But you need to get to that place where you can count it pure joy. And so despite all of the hardships and the challenges and just the things that my father had to contend with, he was an incredibly grateful person. And he looked back with a tremendous amount of gratitude. And I
Mm.
knew that as he embarked upon, this next step of his journey, as he finished his race, he was looking forward with joy. He was looking forward
Yeah.
with faith. And so it
Yeah.
was really easy because I just got to talk about that. And
Mm.
in the midst of grief and suffering, which is real, and it hurts, you can see just by my reaction now. Yeah, we can be sad, but we can also be incredibly grateful that I had a dad.
Yeah, man.
I didn't have to look far to watch someone model courage and strength and responsibility for
Mm.
me. And there was so much to be grateful for. And I wish I had so many more years with him, but I could move forward in faith because I knew that he pointed me to a greater father that
Mm.
can provide all those things at an even more deeper level. And so that was the joy that I was anchored to or looking forward to, and the faith that I was moving forward with imperfectly. Please hear me say very imperfectly.
Yeah.
But I think that's the essence of it, is
Yeah.
looking back with gratitude so that you can move forward with faith.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's maybe deserving of its own subject as a tension episode, but you have actually taught me that, and I think that life is so difficult, right? I mean, to your point, everyone is going to go through their lows, and I think that especially when those lows are things that are either out of your control or were done to you. I think both of those, for me at least, are the hardest times I look back with Thanksgiving.
Hmm.
Praise the Lord, some of those I've gotten to see how the storyline ended up playing out, where that terrible thing that either I was out of my control or frankly was done to me ended up being so good for me in the end.
Yeah,
But gosh, in the midst of it, yeah, you just want to kind of victim out and
totally.
blame and be mad at something. You can be mad at God, you can be mad at anything. And your choice is just that. Like, if you'll look back with the Thanksgiving, then yeah, it's hope and it's faith and it's all these feelings that you can look back in the future. But I know for me, I haven't done that well at times, and it was like my most sad version of me.
Mm.
And so, since I've known you, even outside of the 2019, just so much going on that we'll go back to, you've just been a guy that's done that well. Do you have any advice, just practical advice from people out there of like, is there things that you do in the morning? Is there things you do at night, like habits and things like, how have you kept of anyone that I have interacted with in my life, you have kept the most consistency in not just feeling gratitude, but being intentional to show it, which we can unpack later. I think those are two different things. A lot of people feel it, but if they don't intentionally ever say it, did they complete the process of gratitude? I don't know. But like, how do you do it? Like, what's your practical tips of keeping that mindset in light of even some of the sucky things we're talking about?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I appreciate just your vulnerability and authenticity in it. I think that you said something in there I just want to hit on, and then I'll answer your question. Um, One of the things I talk about with my kids all the time is things can either happen to us or they can happen for us.
Come on.
And so when those bad things happen, and again, I'm not perfect at this. I get this wrong all the time. I want to reframe it to like, how can this happen? How can this be something that happens for us, not to us?
Mm,
Because if you go around looking at like all these things that happen, it's like, yeah, there's a lot of things that could happen to you. But the
yeah.
reframe of that has been helpful. So that's one thing. Another thing is just really trying to dial in on perspective. So C.S. Lewis, who's one of the most instrumental voices in my life, he says, if you look at heaven, you'll get earth thrown in. But if you look at earth, you'll get neither. And so if that's true, and this is a question I ask myself all the time, and I know everybody comes from different perspectives, but for me, I just ask myself, if eternity is real, then what are the implications for today?
Yeah.
And so I really try to maintain a perspective and then try to stay engaged and locked in with things that will be life giving to that perspective, to an eternal perspective, is really, really important. And then the other thing is just being super intentional. And I fail at this, but I try to cultivate relationships in my life. We're all wired differently, but I think probably one of the greatest leverage points for me, if that, and I hesitate to even use that word because I think powerful relationships is probably the best thing,
Yeah.
is as a married guy, if 90% of my life is good, but Julie and I aren't clicking on all, 10 cylinders or whatever, then none of the 90 other percent really matters.
Yep.
And vice versa, if 90% of my life is challenging, but the 10% of my marriage is good and like that's all clicking, then I can deal with the other 90%.
Come on.
And so if that's true, then I think I got to be super locked in and intentional about trying to really cultivate that relationship with my wife.
Yeah.
And that's an example of trying to find those things that like, okay, this has to be right. Physical health has to be right. Spiritual health, mental health, like all these things are leverage points that you got to lock in on, and just identifying what those things are and then trying to cultivate those things.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing there is when we think about the tension of getting it all done, there are things that even if you try to get all of these other things done, if you don't get a few core things done, you actually can't get the rest of them done. So I think this is a really interesting, you know, place that I want to take us here, which is it was once said to me, the people that win in life control their nights and their mornings.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, what are you talking about? It's like,
Yeah.
that just, especially in my 20s, I was just like, I can't even possibly understand what you're saying. Then you start having a bunch of kids and you start being a decade into marriage. And that's just very different than being a couple years into marriage. And I started to learn like, whoa, like for me, if I am feeling at one with the Lord, if I'm feeling at
Mm-hmm.
one with Jacqueline and the girls, and I feel
Good.
physically good, like I
Yep.
put on my clothes, my shirt or polo or whatever, and like I feel good, right?
Right.
Which is nutrition, it's diet, it's all these other things. Like I have realized like that is when all of the other things seem to go better. Maybe not because they're going better, but I have perspective
Right.
to your point to
That's
see
right.
them better because the things that matter to me are good. And so these things can come and go. And hey, life has challenges, right? But it's this idea of getting it done at night and the morning. So I think for you, how do you do that? Because I know you wake up early, you have different things you even do on like Sunday, like a planning meeting with your wife, Julie.
Yep.
Like maybe walk us through some practicals of like how you get it done, because we're hearing that perspective is what changes it, which I think I agree with you. You can have all the practical habits and all
Right.
that type of stuff. But if you don't have the perspective, that's all a waste of time. But like
Yep.
practically, how do you win the mornings? How do you win the night? Like maybe give us maybe the time you're most proud when you're like, man, when I'm clicking, this is how a week works. And then, just to let us all know that the best person in Dallas, Texas has bad weeks too. Maybe give us an example of like,
Yeah.
when does it not go well? And you're like, ooh, I can tell like this is not going well.
Yeah. Yeah. So my mentor told me the day is won or lost in the morning. And that's exactly right. And winning the morning starts with winning the evening. And so that like the
Oh, I
days
like
that
that.
it does,
That's a
yeah,
good
the
one.
days that do go well for me, I don't like to sleep in past 5:30, just with 5 kids, there's
Yep.
a lot that starts to get chaotic pretty early in the morning. So that's some time. Um, Scripture before phone. So making sure that I'm
Mm,
getting in the word before I get on my phone. And bro, it's tempting. I mean, there's always things grabbing our attention. So scripture before phone, and getting a workout in, I kind of look at it like a great workout is kind of like getting ready. Like your day is like a game. And so it's like, I got to get warmed up for my game.
yeah, it's like a
Uh,
football game. Yeah. Okay.
Sometimes, yeah, exactly. And so some days it's going to be, I'm going to have space to maybe get 45 minutes in. Other days it's going to be like a little 20-minute, even if it's just doing like some push-ups and, air squats and stuff like that. But it's doing something
Yeah.
depending on what the day calls for to get the blood flowing is
Yeah.
really, really important. Um, and then making sure that I've got my mind around my calendar for the day. And so, again, for me, I like to pray through my day. And so I like to look at my calendar, pray
Mm.
for meetings, pray
Yeah.
for,
Like pray and meditate on this is, yeah. Wow. Talk about a
exactly.
perspective shaper.
100%. Another just really helpful question that's helpful to frame things, and this is part of the prayer, is like, what is needed from me in this meeting? What is needed
Yeah.
from me? Whether it's a client meeting, whether it's meeting one on one with an advisor, whether it's a coaching session. Like, man, what does this person need from me? Because there's a
Mm,
lot I could go in there and talk about, but what do I need at
totally.
this? What do they need from me at this moment? And that helps shape things. All of this is against the backdrop. It was, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. Julie and I figured out that we have to have a weekly meeting. And that weekly meeting is generally going to be somewhere between 60 to 90 seconds, or 60 to 90
Oh, wow.
minutes.
You guys have
That's
some
quick.
very efficient meetings.
Yeah, yeah,
This
yeah.
is what having a Yahoo account does.
Yeah, yeah, that's what it does.
You're in the efficiency game.
Yeah, 60 to 90 minutes. And we're going through the calendar and we are dialing in on everything, like who's taking whom to school, which days, what are we doing for dinner, who's got dinner, which kids are doing which tasks. We're looking at the travel schedule. We're just mapping everything out. That also gives us space to engage in dialogue about, man, how are our kids doing? What are we seeing? Where are they striving? Where are they struggling? What do we need to be present for? So all these different things. The weeks that we have really good weekly meetings, the week just goes. It's awesome. The weeks where our weekly meeting is like ships passing in the night, it's kind of clunky. And so those are some of the practical things that really help.
Like don't we never plan to fail, right?
That's
we
right.
fail to plan type thing.
That's exactly.
Well, no, I mean, you obviously have been a great example of this. You know, Tiv and my wife and I, having 3 daughters, it is almost crazy how getting that meeting that you taught us, by the way, will completely alter the week. But it's also it's just crazy how I don't think it's talked about enough. One of the biggest ways you could bring joy to your marriage is by planning. Like, when's the last time that was like? Where's that book? You know, it's all about this, that, and the other. And it's like, yeah, but if you didn't plan on the date night, if you didn't plan on what you're doing, kids, I got the kids here and all the different things, and like, then your life ends up becoming, especially maritally, just like slapping hands and saying, "We're doing well, teammates," you know. And I think that that temptation's real. And so I appreciate that a ton of the planning, because I think that planning is one of the things that can solve this tension of getting it all done. Like, if you're just feeling overwhelmed, maybe start with like some planning frameworks. Maybe get some time away from electronics and things. Just write out what your priorities are. All the things I'm hearing you say. So let's go back to 2019. Thank you for going off on that tangent a bit. But you know, so you're in 2019. You know, we kind of talked about all the personal things that are happening, but you know, a lot of people don't really understand, you know, Kyle, the risk that you took. And, you know, I almost want to go to 2019 by actually going back to the early 2000s when you came up with the name 49 Financial, and you gave it to some kid that got done with brain surgery and was all excited. We could get to that at some other time. But like, I think that you were sitting in a tension that you almost made a decision back in the 2000s, right? Early 2000s when you came up with a name that then I think in a lot of ways, you know, some 2 decades later impacted this monster moment. And so can you talk to me about like the tension of coming up with, obviously I'm biased, right? What I think to be is like one of the best brands ever that means something so much. And especially in the post-COVID world, screams this, let's have community. Let's be together, 2 better than 1. But like, I'm curious more of like, how do you feel, if you even feel this at all, how the tension of coming up with that name and then not getting to see it actually be realized for that much time later, was that a part of the 2019 decision? Did that make it easier in dealing with the tension of even that decision?
Yeah, that's really good. A lot there I can talk about. So I'll give you a quick story. When I came out of college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. A lot of people said, "Hey, I think you should go pursue a career in commercial real estate because there's a lot of athletes in that industry, and I think you'd be really good at it." And so I figured, sure, I'll go do that. That tracks, and I did it for a few years, and it wasn't bad by any means. But along the way, I began to kind of have this desire to want to see the work that I was doing on a day-to-day basis play out in a lot of really tangible impact. And I began to engage with people in my community about like, hey, what does that look like? You know, this was kind of the beginning of the whole work is worship stuff and having impact. And I got introduced to this industry of wealth management and financial advising. And I was like, holy cow, I didn't even know this really existed. And so the thought of transitioning into a new career that had its own set of risks, right? It's 100% variable comp, all these things. And being a young dad and husband, I was like, shoot, this is something. And so we just stepped into a season of praying through that decision. And in the midst of that season, I was sitting in a church service and I heard a whole sermon on this idea of Ecclesiastes 4:9, doing life together, all these other things, which was very familiar to me. I mean, like I grew up in FCA, and Philippians 4:13 and Ecclesiastes 4:9 are like cornerstone
The
verses,
two
right?
one. Yeah. Two big ones.
Those are the two. Those are the big two. And so I was like, well, that actually seems like what financial advising is all about. Two are better than one. We get to come alongside our clients and help them get a better return for their labor. And if I could somehow step back into a teamwork environment that I got to experience in sports, and we could do that in business, I felt like that'd be pretty powerful. So
Yeah.
right after that, I called my buddy and I just said, hey, bro, I'm going to, start in this industry. And one day I want to, be a part of something called 49 Financial. And he was like, well, that sounds great. So that
Yeah.
is what launched me into the career. And you're right. It was a season of I had so much I needed to learn and grow in. And I had great people around me to teach me so many of the fundamentals of this business.
Yeah.
And along the way, I don't want to tell your story, but you had become disenchanted with what you were doing. And that same guy, JD, introduced you to financial advising. And you had this ambition to want to build and do on a shared foundation of values. And so I think about that season, and it was a season of waiting and,
Yeah.
being in the adoption game and the foster care game. My wife and I have learned a lot about waiting.
Yeah.
And that's a theme. But that waiting and growing and kind of incubating, I think if I had tried to pursue it in my own kind of devices, my own strength, it would have been really not much at all and not anything near the beauty of what it is today and what it continues to expand and grow and be. And so I'm just so grateful that, we got a chance to connect and among the many others that are here at the earliest stages of 49 and begin to see that vision and that hope become a reality.
So you manage the tension for those years. You've got the name in the back of your mind, right? We get a chance to meet. We get the name, but then 2019, like how much of really creating a namesake do you feel like went into then making a decision to not only leave something that was safe and secure? And I was going to say less risk, but I think we need to define for the audience what risk means before I'll use that term, because I think if you define it, actually, maybe the greatest risk you'll ever take is doing something what the future will look like. But talk to me about like how did you think about that, and maybe give people that don't know your story out there a little bit more of like what were you saying no to, and what were you then saying yes to? Like what were you running to? Because I never got the sense that you were running from. You had really good mentors, obviously great company, all the things. So talk to us about that, and did coming up with the name have anything to do with it? How did you make the decision? Because there's a lot of people out here, I'm sure, that are having to figure out, do they want to make these really bold, I don't know what tomorrow's going to be decision, or do you want to make the one that, you just know is kind of right down the middle of the fairway and you kind of see what your next 20 years are going to be. And there is value to that, right?
Totally.
So I don't want to diminish that, even if you and I have chosen different paths, but walk us through maybe your thoughts there.
Yeah, man. Just to create a framework for that, I've heard you talk about this before. It was something that was very helpful for me. The person that I heard it from was Colin Powell, and reading it talks about the window of actionable probability, and you kind of want to get into this window of certainty, and then just make a decision and move forward. And so that's part of the beauty of it all, and that's why, to your point, there are some seasons where, you need to go down the fairway, and there's other seasons where you need to take that risk. And I'll define risk here for me in a second. And that's the beauty of it all, is that's the adventure and that's the journey. And you get there. There's no like user's manual that says when you're this old, do this or do that. You get to,
I think we all wish there was.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So your question about did coming up with the name influence the decision at all? Absolutely, 100%. I am deeply passionate about this idea of what a group of people who are values aligned can accomplish together that is so far bigger and greater than any individual could do on their own. And to get to work towards that goal and with that purpose alongside men and women that share in those values and that foundation, it's like, dude, I would so much rather pursue that and fail and have to deal with like, oh, it didn't work out or whatever the case may be, than deal with the regret that I would feel if given the opportunity to pursue that and I just didn't do it.
Yeah.
The regret that would come. And I'll go back to a moment. I remember this moment. I don't talk about it often, but I talk
Yeah.
about having that conversation with my dad. And at the time, our son Brady was about 14, 15 years old. And we kind of let him in a little bit on what was going on because he could tell mom and dad are like really intensely praying through some things, and
Yeah.
things don't seem as normal at work
Yeah.
right now.
There's some stuff going down.
There's some stuff going on. And so I just remember explaining to him what was going on. And in his 15-year-old world, he said, well, don't you think it'd be kind of stupid if 49 is what you care about and you didn't just go do that? And I was
Hey,
like,
man, that's it.
I don't ever want to have to go back to this moment we're sitting in my bedroom. I don't have to go back to this moment and say, yeah, I was just too scared. And so there's two quotes that come to mind. I was listening to a Tim Keller's sermon recently, and he said, look, when it looks like obedience is leading to disaster, obey anyway. If that's what obedience is calling for. So that goes back to like, what does obedience look like in this moment?
Yeah.
But there's another takeaway I had from that. And he said, if you obey in spite of suffering, as you obey in suffering, the more durable you become. So you may be in a season right now where you feel like, dude, I am just, hauling rocks, but I'm being obedient to what is in front of me right now. And you can't see the bigger purpose. And there was times in my 7 years where I just felt like I'm just putting one foot in front of the other. I'm just being obedient. But it was being obedient in that season that led to the ability and the durability to be obedient when it looked like obedience was leading to disaster. And so obedience looks different in all different seasons of life. And so just be obedient because you're either preparing for something or you're stepping into something that has the chance to be amazing and beautiful. And it's all going to work for your good as long as you approach it the right way.
Yeah, there's a title of a book called "A Long Obedience in the Same Direction." It's a faith forward book and a great book. But I always think about that in general. Like, it's so interesting you say that. Like if you feel called and led to something, like I know you're referencing obedience as almost this like from a faith lens, but I think for listeners out there, like I also think it's from just like when you make a choice and you feel like you're called and led to do this thing, and it's probably the path that I've always found, if it's a path that will be the most unknown and hardest, it'll probably be the path you're most proud of, and vice versa. But let's say you do that hard one. It's like, man, the expectation that I just don't think we talk about enough out in the world today when we're like choosing adversity to refine character and to live our life on purpose. Frankly, you only get one of them. It's just this idea of like, I am going to be on that same road. Like you said, there's going to be years where it does feel like just I day by day, week by week, just did the job. But it's a long road. If I stay obedient and on that road, this is where it goes. But you have to be going the same direction. And I think what's hard is when you don't have that, you end up going here and here and here, and your road's kind of this. And to your point, you can be hopping jobs or doing all these different things that you do. But gosh, if you had just gone the same road, you may have been losing the game to the people kind of doing that. But eventually, baby, you start to hit that speed, because you just get better because you keep seeing and you kind of put the blinders on like the racehorses, right? So I think that's really good. Kyle, you said you would define for us risk, because I feel like, again, this episode being all around getting it all done, you put your family in risk. You were, you're too humble to say, but you were going to make a lot of money doing a great job, because it turns out clients love you, and so do advisors love to be developed by you. So the economy says that's worth a lot of money. Good for you, right? But that was locked up and sure and good. And then you chose one that, we're sitting 6 years later, and it's like, yes, this was a very good financial decision for you, no doubt, right? You're doing fantastic, but you sure weren't for a few years, right? When you left the sure thing. So maybe walk us through. You made that choice. Yes, 6 years later, it obviously worked out quite well, but like it didn't for a few years. So what was risk defined as when you're just sitting there with Julie and saying, I got 5 kids like you, they're all counting on you. How did you define risk to then help her even make that decision with you?
Yeah. Well, I am going to define another term first, and then I'll talk about risk.
Please.
The difference between security and safety, I think, is a really important thing. And are we solving for safety, or are we solving for what is secure? And sometimes, security doesn't mean being safe. And so we're going to have to step out and take risk, even when it feels like it's not safe. Right. So that's a whole nother topic. And so I never wanted to compromise our security. And so I wasn't worried about that at all. In terms of risk for me, today, and I sit here as a 45-year-old person, willing to revise this definition because there's so much I don't know. I do not want to forfeit all that I believe that there is for me to absorb and do on this journey. And so I want to take the gifts, the abilities, the experiences, and the opportunities that I've been given, and I want to use them best I can to the fullness of my potential, for the glory of the giver of those gifts and for the good of those around me.
Yeah.
And so if that's what I'm solving for, I
Yeah.
felt like there was so much greater risk in staying what would have been a very comfortable situation
Predictable even.
versus
I mean,
predictable, right? So I think you got to define, what are you solving for? And in this moment in time, what gets you closer? And so I hate to keep going back to this perspective, but I think it's just so important. And so you could say risk is regret. And we all have regrets, right? But I didn't want to live with
wow. No, I've never heard that.
Yeah. I couldn't go back to that moment in that conversation with my son, especially after I just had that moment with my own dad. And he had told me, you go run your race. Don't try to run anybody else's race. And then say, hey, buddy, because I was scared, and because I was seeking safety, I said no to the hard thing. I just felt like that would be so disingenuous. So it's a combination of things for me. But that's kind of been the process.
Well, and I want you to unpack this because I think that all of us, no matter what our age is, listening to this, I think one of the things that in order to get that perspective, what you're saying is then in some ways like defining out your values, defining the things that make you, defining even terms like what risk I'll take. Well, you got to define what risk is. All those things. I think there's almost something that's a precursor to all that, which is what's your identity. Mm-hmm. And I think that, gosh, I'll tell you, being 36, I got so much to learn, and I want to be careful ever trying to act like I'm some guru, because I thought I knew things when I was 26, and it turns out I knew nothing. So I can only imagine I know nothing at 36. But at least where I'm at today, it does seem like my identity is actually just me saying what were all of the things that either I persevered through or have frankly, like whether again they were done to me, right, or they were something out of my control, and like how did I respond?
Yeah.
Like the things that were done to me, like a loss of family member, these types of things, what do you do in that moment? Is it, you're still going to have the pain, you're still going to have those things, but how you move on, how you honor them, how you do those things, identity. You're put in front of a really adverse situation, you overcome, and maybe you achieve that thing. Identity, I can do that. Right. And so it almost feels like identity is shaped from adversity.
Yes.
And that's at least what I've seen, but you really are far wiser. I consider you that in every category. So talk to us, like, how would you define identity, and how does that identity then influence your perspective?
Well, let me just affirm you. I know that's not what you're saying, but as someone who's had the privilege of getting to do life with you now for the last 12 to 13 years, I have watched your journey. And it's been a privilege to be alongside you in that, because I have seen, and I see it almost like daily. Like you're a guy that goes fast. Like that's just one of the beautiful things about you is you're hard charging. You have a tremendous amount of ambition. You have just a tremendous amount of energy, and a very, very high capacity person. And so I kind of get to see you grow and progress at such a pace. And dude, if I just think about the way in which you have allowed your identity to really be shaped and impacted. And I've seen, not perfect, nobody is, but I've seen you even in some really difficult situations when you just kind of be like, I've seen your identity even be further refined. And it's such a joy to get to see it be put on display even more now as 36. It makes me excited for all that's ahead of you. So all that being said, there are some moments that I think are critical that that begin to shape your identity. And if you're paying attention, I think that you can really grasp them. I
Mm.
remember there was an occasion in college. I found myself, I had the privilege of having a great season of work in DC, and I was watching the sunrise. I'd gotten up and done an early morning jog, and I was watching the sunrise over the mall there from the Lincoln Memorial. And I thought, I don't know, I was watching the sunrise or sunset. Honestly, I can't remember. But but I thought to myself, Matthew 6, right? Seek first the kingdom and everything else will be added unto you. And I was like, okay, I want that to be one of those kind of stones that I remember as I begin to build my identity. I remember getting into this career, and I was in my second year in this career, and I went through a very, very challenging season. I was fortunate to get off to a great start in this career, but then I experienced some adversity in my second year in this career. And I can just remember being like, man, am I going to make it? Am I going to get through this career? Like, what's going to happen? Like, and for me, it was the first time that I experienced real failure, like real, I felt like I just wasn't getting it done. And
Which, by the way, I do feel like most people need to hear. It's okay if the first real failure you had was in your early 20s. A lot of people probably need to hear that's okay, and also maybe to expect. But yeah, sorry, keep going.
Absolutely. And I remember that I could. There was a quote that I took from that. There was just this season of figuring this out. I can either define myself by what I do and the success that I have in what I do, or I can define what I do because of who I am.
Yeah.
And I think that was the lesson to be learned in that season. So all these different moments, Meg J, she talks about building identity capital. And I feel like they were just putting deposits in this identity bank account. And the beauty, we're in finance, the beauty of all of that is that it just begins to compound. And so then there was a season where we were going through a very difficult season of adoption and foster care. And there was a season of just waiting. And I was like, oh man, and just obedience and waiting. And so I began like that was a gift of like, okay, we're going to deposit this one in the bank account, to where your identity becomes shaped and rooted in ultimately the one who is revealing those lessons to you so that you can endure those seasons. And then
who you fall back on, right?
That's right. But as those additional things come, it's like, okay, I've been through this before. I mean, you think about it for people even in college, your freshman year, you're like overwhelmed that first semester. You're just like, dang, this is all new. And then by the time you're a senior, you're like, oh, this is so normal. It's just like another day to me. And I think about that identity shaping and forming that happens over time, but you got to be locked in on those moments and see them as really deposits in the identity bank account.
Yeah. It's interesting. I know you know this, but I got an opportunity to spend the whole day with the GOAT, Jack Nicklaus, at his club in Jupiter. And awesome. He did a putting lesson. He did all these fun things. We got to play his course. It was great.
I saw a chest bump.
I did do a chest bump. Thank you. Which is dangerous for someone of his age and our height differential, I learned. But no, I remember doing a Q&A with he and his wife and asking this question, like, you're the best. Like, I remember I even asked him directly, like, will Tiger ever like catch you? Will anyone catch you? And he's like, no, but he didn't say it with arrogance. He said it with just like facts. And he said something so beautiful. He said, it was asked of him, like, how did you get to this? We're like, anytime, you were in these majors, it was like, well, there's Nicholas, he's going to win this thing. And he goes, oh, it's just one moment. And he mentioned this story. He had never won a tournament before, that it came down to 18. And this guy made this putt that he wasn't supposed to make. And so effectively he's off the green a little bit and he has to chip it in to win. And he chips it in to win. And he goes, pretty much from that point forward, like, I knew I was a champion. And so it's just this interesting moment of identity shaping that then affects the perspective, which affects managing the tension, because you may not put yourself in a risky position or one that has a lot of pressure if you don't have that identity capital.
That's right.
So I think that's really good, man. Well, listen, this has been amazing. I'll have one more question, and you can take this wherever you'd like to, which is, if this specific episode, and as everyone hears, I wish they heard more about your adoption stories, about all of the things that you've been through that have made you who you are, but that, you're just a well-rounded, deeply involved in the community. You get a lot into a week. That's really, really neat. Like, is there one other piece of advice that you came into this podcast saying, gosh, there's one thing I could get across to anyone listening, like, when I do this, or when I think this way, or whatever it is, this is when it feels like it's no longer attention and it's
Yeah.
joy that I get to do
Yeah.
these things. And it takes away maybe the negative connotation, which of course the point of this podcast. We want people to hear honest reflection on things we're all dealing with so we can all get better. Would there be one last thing?
Yeah, I'll close with this thought. So there is a short story by Tolkien, or Tolkien, depending on how you say it. It's called Leaf by Nigel. I don't know if you're familiar with
Yeah.
that,
Oh yes,
but
very much so.
I was thinking about this being the tension of getting all things done, and at least some of my takeaways from that short story is that you're never going to get it all done.
Come
Because
on.
if you're familiar with the story, I mean, he was an artist that was inspired by beauty, and he spent his whole life striving because of that beauty. And then he gets to the other side and he realizes that for all of his efforts, for all that he put forth, it was essentially a leaf in this much beautiful, grander, bigger picture. And I think about that. And I think the big takeaway for me is be inspired by beauty. There is beauty all
Mm,
around us in the good things and in the hard things. I think about my kids. I've seen them walk through some really, really hard things.
yeah,
And if you get plugged into kind of the foster care and adoption world, it's hard and it's
yeah,
broken,
yeah,
but there's so much beauty on the other side of it. And so in those really, really dark moments when you feel like, dude, I am white knuckling my way through all of it. And maybe it's work, maybe it's adoption, maybe it's dealing with the loss of someone close to you. I don't know what it is, but find the beauty and try to pursue that beauty in those moments, knowing that you're not going to get it all done. And for
yeah.
me, that's where the joy is. And getting to do that alongside my beautiful bride.
Mm.
Um, there's no greater joy I think I'll know this side of eternity than getting to do life and to cultivate in all these different contexts with her, because she's with me in all of it, and that's where the joy is found.
Well, brother, it reminds me of the word legacy. Maybe it's attention and getting it all done, but whatever at the end of your days, I can promise you, Kyle, I think your legacy will be beautiful. To quote the Hamilton play, legacy is planting seeds in a garden you may never get to see.
It's
And I
good.
think that you do that every week, every month, and I've gotten to see it consistently. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for going back to hard things in your life that shape.
Mhm.
And listeners out there, I'd encourage you, if you ever just want to get to know Kyle, he would absolutely take time to have a one-on-one, a call with you, just talk about the things you may be going through. But life's a beautiful thing if you make it, is what I hope that you heard today from Kyle. Kyle, we thank you for being on the tension.
Thanks, brother.